Jim Mark,
Here.
Tony Pacheco,
Here.
Janice Chamberlain, here, Sarah Smith, here, Deborah Hultgren, here, Tim Rourke,
Here.
Morgan Donaldson, Alan Ayers, Nick Lanza,
Here.
Kim Christensen, here, Arthur Christensen, Julie
Here.
Marshall. Thanks, Arthur.
Hi, Arthur. We always start our meetings with an opportunity for the public to speak, and I suspect that we have some people that want to address the board tonight, which is fine. How many of you plan to get up and say something? Oh, all right. Okay, good. If it was going to be all of you, then I'd have to limit the time frame only so that we could make sure we get the rest of the meeting in. But sure, anybody that wants to come up, please come up and address the board. Evening.
Good evening, members of the Region 19 Board of Education and esteemed colleagues. My name is Daniel Arp, and I am a science teacher here at E.O. Smith High School. I was fortunate enough to student teach here 10 years ago. During that time, I fell in love with our school and community and made the choice to apply for a job here 1 year later. Today, E.O. Smith has been the only school that I have ever taught at. This school has given me the opportunity to explore my passions and grow both professionally and personally. I deeply enjoy my job every day, engaging students in science and being a part of an incredible faculty. I am speaking here on behalf of the 112 current members of the E.O. Smith High School Teachers Association. As the Vice President of the Teachers Association, I've had an opportunity to listen to and learn from many individuals within our building. Board members, faculty, the administration, instructional assistants, and students. My conversations with all of them involve common good. We all care about the teaching and learning that's occurring at E.O. Smith. We care deeply about the education of our students and the school and community at large. Nonetheless, two recurring concerns have been brought up again and again by my colleagues: time and sustainability. These two ideas were mentioned during the most recent round of contract negotiations and preface much of the work that our executive council has pursued with Lou and Sharon this year. However, we are deeply concerned that there hasn't been a substantive effort to handle the issue of time as it pertains to the responsibilities of our jobs. More and more continues to be added to the list of our job responsibilities. Learning trackers, creating reassessments, grading reassessments, individualizing interventions based upon student progress, referring students to Tier 2 interventions, addressing artificial intelligence usage in our classrooms, grade synchronization across 2 grade books, Stage 3 UBD curriculum writing, maintaining an updated online learning platform. The list goes on. That being said, nothing has been removed from our daily responsibilities. Meanwhile, we are still planning, instructing, and assessing as we always have, except that the very art of teaching is changing too. And we as teachers are compelled to endlessly adapt to emerging trends. Altogether, this creates a difficult reality. We are overwhelmed. On a personal level, I arrive at school early in the morning, 6 a.m., work through my lunch, and stay until about 4 p.m. on most afternoons. I still leave here every day incredibly overwhelmed about how much I still need to accomplish to simply stay afloat in my position. As a result, my colleagues and I spend hours outside of school on our professional responsibilities. We recognize all that it takes to be a good teacher in today's world, and yet we do not have enough time to complete all that we need to. In fact, I'd argue that I'm working just as hard now, maybe harder, than I did in my first year of teaching. So then I have to ask myself, how are the younger, less experienced teachers doing it all? And if experienced teachers are struggling, how can we expect the younger teachers to be optimistic about the long-term prospects of working in education? The answers to these questions are troubling. Our educators are struggling, and many are choosing to leave E.O. Smith rather than stay, lay down roots, and contribute to our community long-term. These departures have been disruptive for students, for departments and PLCs, and for the school at large. Ultimately, high faculty turnover undermines many of the long-term initiatives that have already been unveiled and disrupts the student experience. We can try to explain away the circumstances behind each individual case, and certainly there are special cases, but the trend is clear. Educators, experienced and inexperienced, have been leaving E.O. Smith. Therefore, it is essential that we stop to reflect upon how we as a district, as a faculty and staff, as an administration, as a teachers association, and as a community can make things better for teachers and students. Moving forward, we want time to be a central consideration for every initiative that is unveiled to us. How much time will each initiative realistically take? How must each initiative be applied across the variety of contexts within our school in order for it to be successful? If we are going to try something new, how do we implement it in a way that is achievable and sustainable for all of our faculty? And most importantly, what is the effect on the overall student experience and learning within our building? I look forward to continuing the conversation in the days and months to come. We all want EO Smith to continue to be an amazing school and community moving forward. Thank you for your time and consideration, and have a good night. I will now invite any additional faculty members present tonight to come forward and speak.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Regional 19 Board of Ed, esteemed colleagues. My name is Suzanne Desjardins. I've been teaching in the Social Studies Department for 27 years. EO Smith is the only place that I've ever taught, the only place I really want to teach. I love teaching. I love the profession. I believe in the transformative power of education. I love and believe in the school community and its commitment to that power. I fully understand and appreciate the need for policies to be set to ensure a consistent and quality experience for our students. However, my concerns are bigger than policy. There's a lot that I can speak to, but I'm going to keep it short with hope that bigger conversations can be opened up in the future. I'm here tonight to express my growing concern over the shift in culture from one that was built on authentic dialogue, robust discourse about teaching and learning, pedagogical innovation, into a culture that is increasingly governed by compliance, performative reflection, and protocols. The emphasis on the latter reduces our ability to engage as thinkers and problem solvers, thus stifling the creativity and flexibility that is necessary to address the multifaceted and complex needs of our students. I'm speaking to you tonight because the growing list of mandates and profound systemic changes in the way we deliver education to our students has made the teaching profession unsustainable. People are leaving. People are leaving EO Smith. The teacher shortage crisis is real, and EO Smith is not immune. We need to be discussing why this is happening. For our students to thrive, our teachers need to thrive. For our teachers to thrive, their lived experiences and insights need to be a significant part of the discussion when it comes to the planning and implementing of policies and initiatives. All I'm asking of you tonight is to keep this in mind as you continue to do the important work that you were elected to do.
Thank you.
Chairman Mark and members of the Board of Ed, good evening. My name is Joe Goldman. I'm a teacher in the Social Studies Department at EO Smith High School here, and I've taught at EO for 11 years. EO Smith is my alma mater, and I'm honored to teach in the school. When I was a student here, I remember feeling inspired to learn more and to think more deeply about the world around me. I still remember the most powerful lessons that my high school teachers offered me, and I would not be who I am without these lessons. A couple of them are still in the room here, and I'm honored to be around. I would not be teaching here without those lessons. And even though I haven't grown much taller since I graduated, I've grown in other ways. And one of the reasons I wanted to teach at EO because I felt I was ready to give back to a school and the community that gave so much to me. And I want to be part of a learning community that has the reputation that we do here at EO. EO has a reputation for excellence, has a reputation for inspiring students and for a creative and unique approach to education. The Board of Education and community that sends their students to us has a reputation for being especially supportive of its teachers and uniquely engaged in the education process. I have members of the community who visit my class all the time because they care deeply about education and want to give back to it. And literally just yesterday, I had a former student who came to guest lecture in one of my classes, and he hit a home run with a lesson that he came to teach. That sort of thing must not be especially common in schools, and we do a lot right here, and there's a lot to be proud of. But I am concerned that the climate and culture of EO Smith is eroding in a way that makes it difficult for teachers to be at the top of their game and for us to push students to be their best. More specifically, I feel that we as a school used to empower teachers more, celebrate their individuality and talent, and give teachers the flexibility to harness their experience and passion and talent in a way that would benefit their students. So in other words, I think we used to place more trust in our teachers. More recently, we're asked to align our teaching to each other to promote a more standard approach to education. And sharing best practice is a good idea. Collaboration and agreement is often possible between teachers, but we should not lose our passion and our individuality in the process of closer alignment. Especially if we want to attract the best teachers to EO, we need to maintain our reputation as a school that celebrates teachers and gives them professional flexibility. Those are the things teachers are motivated by, and teachers are at their best when they're feeling motivated. Better alignment seems to be one goal of the grading and reporting policy, and that seems fair to our students because it would help to ensure a more common set of experience, but it may not ultimately be what's best for our students in terms of their education. What is best for our students is a passionate and inspiring teacher in every classroom. The grading and reporting policy is a relevant part of this conversation because it asks for a common set of learning targets and common set of unit guides, but it will require an enormous amount of time to be spent by teachers aligning curriculum that is generally common already, but not as common as the policy calls for. I'm concerned that this will overwhelm teachers and will have unintended consequences in the classroom where students will be presented with a more formulaic approach to education, one that we're not built around and pedagogically many teachers are not comfortable with here, and one that I think students will find less engaging. So even without additional changes, new teacher demands like updating our Canvas pages, coding our online brain book, finding ways to creative ways to avoid the distraction of cell phones, and keeping up with and ahead of AI are now added to the more traditional responsibilities such as grading, updating curriculum, lesson planning. Where will the time to implement learning targets, provide feedback on those targets, create new assessments so that students can reassess, and create common unit guides and these sorts of things, where will that time come from? It feels to me that this will add to the burden on educators, and I do appreciate that the goal of this policy is to create consistency, but I also worry that we will lose more than we will gain. This particular community has a proud tradition of civil discourse that leads to constructive change. I think that's exactly what we need now between students, Board of Ed members, teachers, administrators, and everyone, every stakeholder with a vested interest in education here. I would love to see a forum for all people to come together and discuss the unique challenges to education, the things that teachers and students are confronted with now. I got the sense that the teachers that I mentioned at the beginning, what I was saying, had a lot of flexibility and were teaching to their passions. And I want the teachers at this school to continue to have the ability and feel empowered to teach in that sort of way here at the school. I think that's what makes this a uniquely great school here. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Amy Afton. I jumped in because I'm somebody that gets more and more nervous. I was always a student that wanted to do the first presentation because sitting makes me really erratic. And I apologize in advance if I'm not as articulate or as intelligent sounding as some of my colleagues who've spoken before me. Mastery, learning, and reassessment have been a part and culture of the World Language Department for years. And while we've embraced it and endorsed it on formatives, and we certainly see it favorably impact students' grades, we have not always seen that it has resulted in improved understanding or ability to learn to use the language that they're studying. For many students, reassessment cannot be equated with mastery. Additionally, not all students wish to reassess. And often it is the student who is most in need of reassessing who will opt not to do so. Our fear is that those who are already demonstrating a solid grasp of the material will now be asking to do so, to reassess in the chase for the highest GPA, and now not out of an interest for learning. We question, or I question, the research and pedagogy behind the new policy, which, as I understand it, will permit students to reassess on any assignment, formative or summative. What is the message that we're giving our students? How often will students be allowed to or encouraged to redo any work in the future for improved grades or outcomes? Yes, I understand that process and revision is important. Certainly here, we work super hard together. I have incredible colleagues here who spend lots of time revisiting, reassessing what we're doing, asking why. I came to EO 8 years ago after 18 years at Ram High School, and I have learned so much from the amazing people I work with. The people at Ram work hard. These people work 10 times as hard, and they are brilliant at what they do. Again, though, we know that you don't always have opportunities to redo everything. And right now, being asked to come up with new assessments for each thing that we're asked to give, any assignment that a student does, seems very daunting. In my department as it is, we frequently come up with three versions, maybe 4, of the same formative assessment to meet the needs of the students in front of us. If we are then having to recreate other things, that's going to be untenable. Furthermore, this policy significantly increases the work for teachers who must create new assessments for the same learning targets for multiple assignments. We've been told that we are not efficient or that we should be able to do this in our PLCs or to use AI. For individuals who have 5 preps and teach singletons and believe in personal and professional integrity, those solutions feel out of reach and disconnected. And mind you, we do have a handful of staff members who teach 5 different preps. And many of those preps are singletons, which means that when they PLC, they may be PLCing with somebody who has no idea what their content is other than I teach a language and so does this individual. Additionally, we do not have the instructional assistants now to lend a hand, and this policy feels that much more difficult to achieve. Next year, many of us will be teaching courses that are new to us, with only a skeleton outline and rubric. And I don't know if any of you have ever been handed something and said, here, go do this. Your friend just did it, then you can follow the same thing. It doesn't mean the same outcome for everybody. I have some amazing people who do such great things in my department. When I've been asked to try to do the same thing, I fail because it's not mine. Joe spoke to creativity and individuality. If you're telling me that I have to teach line like lockstep, and we pretty much do. If you asked Abby LaRoe to come in here, she'll tell you world language. We are pretty much on the same page any given day, but it does not mean the content's being delivered exactly the same way. Asking us to determine the point values for all assignments for each unit before the beginning of the year feels incredibly difficult. I now know, other than trying to put my husband's estate at rest and taking care of my mentally ill child, I know what I'm doing this summer. When you ask us to walk and do everything just like any other person is in the other room, it does not mean the same experience for each kid. Far from. And I'm a veteran teacher. It tamps down our professional judgment and creativity, and it causes tension between our desire to do the right thing for our students and to adjust to the students in front of us when we're dictated by policy that we have to be doing the same exact thing as the next person, or we have to be very, very close in step and offering the exact same material. Today, one of my very astute sophomore students in one of my ECE Spanish class noted that in the last 2 texts we studied, characters were confronted with the notion of obeying to obey. And what happens when you just blindly obey? She asked me what the message was in those 2 pieces, those 2 texts that we looked at. And when I turned the question back on her, she said that she thinks that we shouldn't accept things blindly, that we should feel strong in our convictions and speak up when we believe something isn't right, when it's not good for the better of all people. She's right. And that's why I'm here today. Thank you for this.
Hello, my name is Matthew Lissy. I'm a parent and a teacher here at EO Smith. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Board of Education, the superintendent, our administration here at EO Smith. I don't enjoy coming up to speak like this. When I moved to Connecticut in 2004, this was my dream to work up here at EO Smith. And I worked at a different school for quite a while, working on a really fun project down there, but long story short, I had the opportunity to come up to EO Smith. I applied and ended up getting the job. I then moved my family up here to Mansfield, and I'm part of the community now. In every different aspect, I see the kids at school, I see them out in the community, and it's a lot of fun. I still love being here. I love working here. I have no axe to grind. That's not why I'm here. I'm hoping that my comments will help sort of bring everybody together and we can get back to a good place that I found when I started working here at EO Smith. Some of this stuff that I'm going to talk about is just what it is to be a teacher in general, not necessarily just specifically to EO Smith, but just because the profession may be under strain right now doesn't mean that we can ignore that part or we should ignore that part. I don't normally like to type up things, but I typed up some things. So I'm a parent and teacher and I'm deeply concerned. My daughter had 2 teachers leave in the middle of this school year. She's here at EO Smith this year, the freshman. Of course, no one wants to burn a bridge, so creative stories are told while the truth is whispered to colleagues as to why they left. Thinking back to when I started here about 10 years ago, it's quite different now. When I started, people would stay late, and when I would come up on the weekend to do some work, there might be up to a dozen teachers parked in the parking lot. And you know, they're in the building working, it was weird because it felt more like a college than it did a high school. People were happy to be here and individuals were valued and their unique teaching styles were celebrated. Greatness flourished on the part of all, but most of all our students. Then COVID hit. Now, we can't change that, but the school did what it thought was the best at the time. Nobody ever saw something like that in modern history. Post-COVID, there has been a push to homogenize everything. And while that is certainly, this is why I don't like reading. While certainly there should be some benchmarks, it feels like academic freedom is something we need to guard and defend as teachers. School-wide test scores and our school rankings have been going down. As a parent and as a teacher here, that's disturbing to me. People are frustrated, teachers are frustrated, many teachers have left. A reaction to this was not for the students to do more, but for the teachers to do more. And this is where teacher frustration stems. We have been given excessive data collection, forms, more forms, as a way to figure out the problem, while it doesn't feel like we were asked what we think will work. This has led to overwhelmed teachers and no change in the outcome. Teachers filling out forms does not solve the problem. It's like trying to repeatedly fix your engine while in reality the transmission is bad on your car. Teacher knowledge, intuition, and common sense is not accounted for there seems to be a fixation on data. It is like saying, what will happen when I turn on the light switch? And the teacher would respond, the light would turn on. But nobody cares to hear that because we need data to support it, no matter what our common sense and our experience might say. So the teacher is forced to flip the light switch up and down a few hundred times to show the data that the light would turn on when the switch is flipped. Meanwhile, the toilet was clogged, but we were not allowed to work on that problem, and now I have to go. This is what it feels like to be a teacher. It feels like spinning your wheels in the mud while not trying what you think or know will work. or not being allowed to pursue that. The truth is, we do have and collect lots of data. We have grades for our students. In Canvas, we mark late assignments. We mark missing assignments. We take attendance and mark absences, a lot of which is important pieces of the problem we're seeing with kids. We also populate our Canvas pages in the gradebook, which students and parents can access at any time. All of this data is already out there and available. While teachers are being asked to do more, we feel like students are being asked to do less. No deadlines, no late penalties, no homework. We got rid of homework because it wasn't equitable, but now we need to put it back in the curriculum. All while we're being told science does too much work and we're just trying to teach our curriculum now. So the teachers are kind of left questioning your sanity at some point. And that's what it feels like to be a teacher. The way to fix this morale issue is somewhat simple, in my opinion. First, stop blaming teachers and hold the students accountable. Treat teachers with dignity and respect. We all have advanced degrees or are working on them. We have an enormous amount of classroom experience, subject knowledge, and common sense. Our administration knows the rules, statutes, and laws far better than most teachers do. If we work together to increase student learning and performance, think of how wonderful things could be again. Teachers get upset when they feel something they are being asked to do takes them away from something they feel they actually need to do. And that's where a lot of this frustration, I think, comes. If what we are being asked is important, it would be self-evident, like driving a car with your eyes open or taking a breath every few strokes on a long swim. Solutions to school problems should start with the people in the trenches, the teachers. And the process should pursue the implementation of teacher ideas as opposed to simulating teacher input towards a predetermined outcome. Excuse me. Now, I have seen great things happen at the school when teachers were asked what we need. We have a knowledgeable and talented administration, and when they throw their support behind teacher-generated needs, amazing things happen at this school. The SASH Study Hall program was a teacher-generated idea that took a number of years to get put in place, but has made a huge positive impact on the learning and understanding of our students. A few years ago, an administrator came into our science department meeting and asked us what we needed. We said signing the kids into a SASH for an extended period of time would be helpful. Ironically, we don't do that, but that's a separate thing. The administrator supported us and made that happen that year, and that made a huge positive difference with the students, their knowledge, their outcome, their performance in the class. This year, we have had very rowdy freshmen. It was a lot of fun. But they matured, believe it or not, I feel really good about them now. The first week of March, I asked an administrator for some support. The kids were just out of control, and at some point you run out of teacher tricks. I asked an administrator for some support, and I was given a disciplinary option by that administrator. Without getting into all the details, I was told to warn the kids first and then send them down to the office. Now, since the first week in March, for this excessively rowdy class, I've been teaching 21 years. So this was one of the, ones I'll remember. Since the beginning of March, I only gave 3 warnings out, and I never had to send a kid out. But just having that backup and having that support meant all the difference in the world. And I knew it, I felt it, and the kids knew it, and the kids felt it. And because of which, those kids are doing very well. And they're gonna do very well. Not officially over, but we're very close. The support was all I needed. We had another administrator give us great professional development where we were shown Notebook LM, which has helped many of us gave us multiple new tools to help us reach the kids, to help the kids access the material. The Student Center took a few years to figure out, but is one of the best things that has happened to E.O. Smith as well. All these things have been positive teacher initiatives backed by administration. Great things happen. Students learn, students achieve. It's the way it needs to be. It's the way it works. It's wonderful. And although I can't speak for everyone, I believe that having teachers generate ideas for solutions to student problems will generate the positive responses that all of us, teachers, administration, and the Board of Ed members want. Please support the teachers so we can properly support our students. Student success is what teachers, parents, administration, and the BO and the Board of Ed all want in the end. Please allow us teachers to use the wisdom of our experience to solve these problems. We may have the knowledge, but we really can't do anything without the proper support. And my closing thought, and I'm sorry, brevity is not my strong suit. My closing thought is this. When I first started teaching, I don't know, somewhere in 2004, maybe it was 2006, I was at a PD in a different district. And this guy came in and he was very dramatic and very lively and he was over there and he was screaming at the teachers and he said, "Who is your customer? Who is your customer? The students, they're all here. They are your customers. You need to serve your customers." And we were sitting there and you know, I had never thought of it that way before. I was only a few years into teaching. And the guy was right. And when it's right, it's beautiful. And everybody sees it. And all the administrators were nodding and clapping and, you know, they were practically bowing over their nod. And then the guy goes, "Administrators, I see you all nodding and clapping. You like this?" And they all said, "Yeah." They said, "Who's your customer?" And all the teachers screamed and yelled and shouted and were clapping. But I believe that's true. We are here. I am a servant. I'm here to serve my students. I'm here to meet them where they're at. I'm here to give them what they need and whatever that takes, and I'm willing to do that. Many nights on Friday when everybody goes home and they're all partying, I'm here planning my classes, I'm making my copies, then the copier runs out of staples. But, you know, after I just filled it up with paper, but I need to be ready. I want to be ready to go for the next week. So the only thing I have to worry about is how I can help the kids. What are they going to come to me with that week? And I can't say anything bad about parents. I've had really good experiences with parents. Because parents and teachers want the same thing, success for their kids. And what I'm asking for is that you allow us with our knowledge and our background and everything that we've had to come up with some solutions. We have examples of great solutions that teachers have come up with and administration has supported and the Board of Ed has supported, and great things happen because of that. I want to take this place back. I know we can't. COVID happened, all this stuff happened in the world, times change. But I can't even tell you how much teaching has changed in 21 years. And even teaching a couple years ago was different. And I always thought it was funny when I was in teacher prep program, the one teacher would pull a file and say, "Oh, wait till you get to this point where you can pull a file." And I thought, this guy's kind of stupid because like your kids' needs are going to change. You never can pull a file. You may have something to base it on. You may not start from zero, and every year it's different. Every year my kids are different. Their needs are different. And we need to adapt and evolve to that. And the student needs should be first. Now, I think what we're having here is a bit of a, how are we going to fix that? How are we going to address student needs? I would love to see more of a teacher voice in that. Let's have a teacher voice in that. What would happen What would happen if each department sat down next year at the beginning of the year and say, what are your needs? Or even at the end of this one, what are your needs? What are the problems you're seeing? You in the trenches, what are some solutions to those problems? And then when the teachers generate those, admin looks and says, okay, how can we do this for the teachers? The way they did for all the examples I gave. And then you guys as the board, can we support our administrators so they can support our teachers, so they can support the students? And we can get back to the E.O. Smith that we were back when I used to drive by it in 2004, wishing to be a part of it. I want to be a part of that again. I don't want to see more people leave. I don't want to hear people complain. My goal when I come to work is make as many people smile as I can through my shenanigans, whether that's kids, whether that's teachers. That's what I want to do. That's why I'm here. And then I'm going to teach them a bunch of biology based on our curriculum. But I think we all need some help. We need some healing. We need to check ourselves, check our egos, check our everything. Remember why we're here. It's the kids. Let's get back to that. I don't want to see adversarial relationships between admin and teachers, or just have, and I don't, it's hard to say that, oh, they're doing something. I don't think they're doing anything. It's just, we're trying to all solve problems. And the problem is it hasn't been working yet. And that leads to frustration. And what do people do when you get frustrated? They eventually start picking at each other, right? But let's try to put the kids first. Let's put the kids' needs first. And let's build that, starting there in a real bona fide, legitimate way. And this is why I said brevity wasn't my strong suit. I thank you all. I am so sorry it took so long. Thank you very much.
Before you begin, how many more people are going to want to address the board? Because we're getting to the point where we need to move our meeting along. So I want to know how many more want to get up and address, because you'll need to keep, okay, Lou, anybody else? All right, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me this time and good evening. I'm Christina and this is my fourth and last year here at E.O. Smith. I'm very, very grateful for all the inspiring colleagues and students I've met here who have really helped me grow and made me certain that teaching is something that I'm very passionate about. But I'm here even though I'm not going to be here next year because I'm very concerned about the, I think, grave and irreversible harm that these policies might, and particularly, in my opinion, the reassessment policy that will affect my students and all the students. I don't know how to say this very concisely, but in the most concise way, I feel like the policies will change two things, which is the values of the students and the priorities of the teachers. Some students will care more about the grade than the learning, and students as a whole will focus more on the grades rather than focus on their past grades and past assignments rather than like moving forward and pushing themselves to master previous content, which were prerequisites for their new learning, if new learning is the focus. I feel like teachers' priorities and time will have to shift to creating alternative assignments and grading them. And even if we use AI, we have to corroborate the information. We have to see if it engenders the same level or depth of thinking, and we have to check if it's even relevant. I think that while these policies are probably based on like really relevant and effective research, I think we have to look at the existing culture that sometimes doesn't hold students very accountable or to high standards. I've been told like not to take points away for students using AI. I've been having students unfortunately using and abusing the current late policy, which is in English 5 days after the unit closes. I have a 2-month unit closing now, and I have a student that I haven't seen in 2 months turning in their work now and receiving a similar grade to someone who has struggled, but worked in the class and used their time judiciously. I feel like we already have many assessments that if students did use their time, did ask for help, did struggle to learn, will already bolster their grades and make up the foundation of their grades. I feel like the decrease in student accountability leads to a decrease in rigor, and by rigor, I mean like respect for objective facts, informed research, open discussion, and things that I think are important. I feel like these policies are telling them that they should care about their grades and not about their learning. And they're more focused on having them receive a grade that they're happy with rather than actually preparing them for the learning that they'll encounter later or experiences. I have a sister, my younger sister is in college now at an Ivy League institution, and it is difficult. There are no reassessments, and she told me that she learned the most in the class she almost failed because it pushed her to really challenge herself and know that she would fail if she didn't try. I feel like, I'm sorry if this sounds like very serious and grave, but I think that the gravity of the situation is important to convey. I'm reminded of this like Chinese idiom, which originates from a story of a farmer who literally like pulled his crops up because he wanted them to look taller than his neighbors. And the next day they obviously wilted and died. I feel like similarly, their grades might look better because of these policies, the students' grades, but I don't think it addresses the root problem of us telling them and them internalizing the idea that grades are more important than their learning. And I really hope that there's more collaboration with teachers on what we think really helps them learn. And that is the only reason why I feel like I'm here today. Thank you.
Love the last words.
I don't think so, but.
Good evening. So we've heard a lot tonight about, the workload and the time. I'm sympathetic to that. I'm working more than I ever have. I think teaching is an extremely difficult job to do, and even more difficult to do well. And I do agree, it's become more and more complex. The things we have to deal with now, we didn't have to deal with before. So the variables there are many more, and they are more complex, and it's also, there's an immediacy. These kids are living in this world too. And I'm hearing a lot about consistency, and it's being viewed as a bad thing, and it's not a bad thing. It is not a strength of ours, and I believe that leads to a lot of the problems that we have. This policy is centered around consistency. Words like autonomy and creativity are being used as if they're a threat. There is nothing that will take away creativity, autonomy in this school. I've been here for 23 years. It's too much ingrained into the fabric. We have people come in and out of here constantly. Okay? This community is involved, and it truly is a special school. But consistency requires working collaboratively. And it's achieved through working through differences. And this is where I think we fall short. I don't feel that we're as honest and we hold each other accountable as we should be. And that starts with me, the administrative team. It's something we're working on. But these conversations that we have to have to understand what one another is doing and to respect the difference and to have an informed decision to do something different, they're not happening. And I feel like as a result of that, kids are suffering. We have to do a better job of communicating, sharing within PLCs and not moving away when it gets difficult. And that is a huge concern of mine, not just with grading policy, but in the school as we move forward. This policy is about access. Nothing in this policy is new. The past 3 years, we've been working on the provisions in this policy. There's been training, there's been templates, there's been all this stuff. Since I got here 23 years ago, people have been doing retakes. They've been offering extensions. Yes, there was homework. They've even been planning long-term units. It's not anything new. The only thing new is that now we have a system that guarantees it for everyone. And that's a big shift. I understand that. But we no longer have the range to say when a kid's going to get an intervention and who is not. And that's dangerous. That is a threat to equity. And that is what this whole thing is about. Once we said we were about equity, we went down this path. And it is not being achieved right now with E.O. Smith. The old E.O. Smith, it's great to talk about. I'm part of it. But the old E.O. Smith was about who does well and who doesn't. And now we're looking at, it's not okay to not do well. And yes, we can call them accountable, hold them accountable and say it's them and say it's their parents, but they don't want to come in here and fail. And their parents are doing the best they can too. If they had the solution, they would do it. It's on us. And yeah, it's more, but it is where we are right now. It can't come down to who gets a teacher who says, yes, you can do this, and who gets a teacher who says no. Because there are kids in this building that feel like they're on the outside looking in, and they're not going to approach a teacher because they don't feel like that's for them. It happens everywhere in the school, and it's dangerous. So everything was talked about today, you want to open dialogue, let's do it. I'm all for it. In that scenario, have a department member come and we'll talk about it. You know what the data is. We've been showing it to you for years, and it still exists. But we still keep hearing the same thing. So if you want to take a solutions-based approach to this, let's go. But we have to work together and be more honest with what we're facing right now and what we're going to do about it. And I think that in the back of the minds of some of the people here, it's if we put this resistance up, then we'll keep it where it is. And it's not working for some kids. And it's not working for kids who aren't coming to, they're not coming to board meetings and their parents don't. And they don't feel that they're being represented by the board, by the administration. They don't. And it's a growing percentage of kids, and I'll tell you who they are. Hispanic students from Ashford, our free and reduced lunch students, and our students with IEPs. They have value, and they're not the ones that are going to come up and tell us how great we are. A lot of times they're opposition. But a policy like this, I understand it's prescriptive, but it's prescriptive for everybody. And that's the difference, and that's the shift. I feel like this is a great opportunity. It's a good moment to recenter, sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do? We've been open for that, okay? But the way this whole thing happened was not on the up and on, okay? It was a surprise. And I have members of the association coming to me saying, please do something. This is underhanded and it is not unifying at all. And we have to stop this dysfunction. I'm a principal of the school. I've been here for a long time. I'll take the responsibility. But if you want agency, then let's get together and let's figure this thing out, because we have problems in this school. And they're not popular problems. People don't want to fix them readily, and they're complex. They are. And I'm not saying it's easy. But to take a step back right now, I think would be catastrophic for our most marginalized families. And I think we can do better. I think we can serve all. I really do. But we have to be more honest with one another, and we have to be willing to get into the weeds with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Okay, now we're going to move on to committee reports, and we'll start with personnel.
Community, not teacher. Community member?
We'll need to make it brief. We've spent a lot of time on this so far.
Full disclosure that I am a teacher in town, but is this on?
Yes.
I'm not at this school. I've been teaching in town for 34 years. I'm here as a parent. I have two children. My oldest daughter went to E.O. Smith, graduated in 2019, and my son is currently a freshman. My daughter was moderately motivated. And because she was held accountable by some really challenging, pretty phenomenal teachers, she did pretty well. She graduated, she just finished her master's degree last year and finished her first year of teaching in public school, is doing really well. My son needs a little more of a push. I'm in awe of his teachers this year. And I will say as a teacher, like I always thought that I worked hard until I saw if John Swanson's here, that guy's grade book and the feedback that he gives, it's really phenomenal. I feel ashamed. He has hundreds of grades in that grade book, and I feel like I'm getting all the communication that I need. I want to share with you two quick conversations that I've had just in the past month. One was when he was writing an essay, and as a parent and child are wont to do, we disagreed over some of the revision suggestions I was giving him. It was kind of weak. And his answer was, well, let me just submit it because Miss Lynn will put comments in and then I can resubmit, I can reassess. I was hurt by that because what I was hoping for was the school to be able to partner with me in holding him accountable. Similarly, he had a geometry quiz. He had come home late from a sports practice and I asked him to get to it, right? He had to do a little more work for this. Actually, it was a test the next day. And again, his answer was that he was tired and why not take the test, find out what's on it, and then he could retest the following week. Yeah. I want this school to partner with me the same way that you did for my daughter who was here not too long ago. One of the cool things too, as I look through his Canvas this year, is there are hundreds of grades if I look at all of his classes. So there's plenty of room to fail. If he fails a quiz or if he fails a test, he'll have other opportunities to do well. And all of his teachers I have found have been incredibly hardworking, caring, and dedicated. And if there is a teacher here who is not, or 4 or 5, as many schools have, I don't know if that's a problem that can be solved by a blanket solution. I think that can be solved by administrators getting in those classes, having those hard conversations. I see Denise Abercrombie behind me. When my daughter was here, we had a challenge with one of her English teachers, and that's exactly what happened. Denise intervened, the problem was solved. I appreciate your desire to promote mastery-based learning. I think it's really important. And I will say this, because I'm going to keep this brief. I had more I wanted to say, but if my son leaves here without having mastered geometry, biology, sorry, Mr. Swanson, your class, Joe Goldman, I can live with that. I will be utterly gutted, though, if he leaves here without having learned responsibility, managing deadlines, time management, accountability to people. There are so many opportunities to fail and to learn from that failure. And I really want E.O. Smith to be a place where we're, it's a quote I have on my desk as a teacher. It says, prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child. I think the most powerful tool we have as teachers, as parents, as educators, as board members, is the power that comes with our expectations, those tacitly communicated and those very explicitly communicated. And we have to keep them high because as soon as we start to lower them, the kids pick it up really fast and they will live to those lower expectations. Let's get back to that. Keeping the bar high and communicating that to our kids in all the ways that you do. And finally, just thank you to the people here who have taught my son this year, my daughter in the past. I am forever grateful.
Thank you. And now we are going to move on. Committee reports, personnel.
So personnel, we have been working on custodian negotiations, and June 9th, the personnel committee has a meeting scheduled for 6 to 8, from 6 to 8. So hopefully our personnel committee members will be there for that, because we need to kind of keep our custodian negotiations moving forward. Yeah.
Policy?
Policy met, we
Meeting
discussed,
tomorrow too, aren't you?
yes,
Yeah.
we discussed the regulations for the policy. And kind of went through the pilot program and regulations that were staying and had conversation around that. And then we also discussed the policy for the tuition credit for staff, which I think that's on the agenda later tonight. And we have a meeting scheduled tomorrow. Yeah, and tomorrow we're going to talk about regulations again. So.
Thanks, Kim. Finance?
Finance, but prior to this meeting, we've discussed some staffing changes for 25-26, excuse me. And we also were looking at future meetings to discuss funding for meetings.
Curriculum?
Curriculum is meeting tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Building, Tim?
Building met just prior to this, some ongoing topics. He, sort of falling under the bucket of indoor air quality. The internal maintenance team is picking away at the open items that were identified, and they're on a pretty good pace there. Our engineering consultancy is still preparing the report of kind of the gap assessment of what was identified previously and what that budget and what the priorities look like for that. The evaluation is still ongoing. The turf side, some minor punch list issues still remain. So our folks are working on that still, holding our installer accountable. And then ongoing conversations relative to long-term space for, like a broken record, I think I say this every time, right? Long-term space for our STAR program is something we continue to work on. So we'll stick with that until we have an answer.
Thanks, Tim. EDJ.
Yes, we did not have a formal meeting, but four of the members of the EDJ committee attended the Parents for Racial Justice meeting last week, at which teachers participating in the Racial Justice Academy cohort presented the results of this year's activities and progress. I attended the first meeting back in September, and the Racial Justice Academy cohort talked about what they were planning to do. So this was partly, this is what we plan to do, this is what we've done. I think the important takeaway for us is that seeing the interaction between the parents with the cohort was, to me, an extraordinary event, which it showed how we can interact positively, provide feedback. For the members of the EDJ committee, we were just sitting there drawing it all in. I mean, it's important for us to hear these things as members of the board. But I do think that this sort of interaction between parents groups and the teacher groups doing this is important. I think that the perspectives, the issues that were raised by the parents group are important and we need to address. We have a lot of work to do to make E.O. Smith an equitable community for all its students. And we are working on it, and I'm glad to be participating in it. But there's a lot of work to be done. We still need to focus on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
I just have just a piece. I think there were a couple of really important key takeaways from that meeting. It was a great meeting, and kudos to our teachers who have been, really working hard on a variety of levels, coming in, presenting their work and sharing that with our parents, and to our parents who again have come to the table, to collaborate always, and the conversations aren't always easy. But they are always, there's always, I think that idea of positive intent on both sides where, there's grace. We're mostly on our part where we're given some grace, which is great. And we appreciate that because that's how we learn and grow. But some of the two big takeaways as far as answers to the questions of proceeding for next year, for the committee and for the school, centered around standards with expectation. So when you're talking about like the behaviors or how to, it's great that we're making some progress, but there's still a lot of work to do with, setting standards within of expectation for behaviors and how we're dealing with and what our expectations as far as racially charged or microaggressions. That was one big piece I think that we heard that resonated, along with the idea that it's, that there are some concerns and some things that we need to tackle when it comes to unconscious bias in our grading. That was a large piece of our conversation, and I think it was a really good one.
I had a comment, if I could. I would like to express my appreciation to the parents in that group and their children. I was talking to my colleague Nick and said how amazing these young people are, because the organization and just who the parents are and the young people, they have a voice and they are very eloquent in their speech and their calmness. I think you can tell some of the parents who have taught them how to have grace and speak their truth. And so this is wonderful because this is what a goal has to be, to enable and empower our kids so they can speak the truth. And I was just so proud of all of our young people. So thank you, parents, and please tell them. Well, I went up to the young people and they looked down, where is she? Because I'm short. And they go, oh, thank you very much. And they have such lovely manners. One of the gentlemen, shook my little hand. So parents, excellent. Thank you.
Now we can go on to our student report. Ellery, Mary, and Gracie. Which one of you is going first?
All good.
I knew it would be you.
All right. As a senior, there's a lot of senior events that have been happening and will happen. We had senior outing last Tuesday. Did you both go? It was fun. I had a lot of fun. I was exhausted by the end of it though. I know Mr. Goldman went. There was a lot of seniors went with lots of fun things to do. Senior class night was 2 weeks ago, where seniors were given awards and scholarships that they earned. And then graduation, which is next Thursday at the Jorgensen. I'm very excited. And seniors have 5 days of school left. We end next Tuesday. I believe underclassmen should end on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what classes they have. Finals and field day, I did not attend, so I cannot say anything on that.
And then I wasn't actually signed up to speak today, but hearing everyone talk, I just think as seniors, it's also important to recognize the outstanding respect we have for our teachers, who are experts both in their respective subjects and in their ways of encouraging us to fail and to continue to grow. And in these last 5 days, I hope you all know how thankful we are for everything you've done.
I don't know, I think Ellery covered most of it. Seniors are just excited to graduate. There's a lot of fun things that have been happening. I thought senior outing was so fun. And the fact there were other schools there, it was really just everybody got to all come together. Yeah. One more thing, there was evening of the arts tonight. That's where I came from. It's already forgotten I'm wearing my band shirt. There was an art gallery with all the different art classes, stuff open for everyone to see, and the orchestra, wind ensemble, choir, and symphonic band all played. I think it went really well. I was really sad at the last concert, but I think it went well. I miss all my teachers so much.
Thank you. Sure.
So this is our last meeting with our seniors who have been amazing. And it certainly has been my honor to get to work with you all over the last couple of years. You re-instill every time that we meet. It's always the best part of my day. And, you know, the reason for that is you kind of re-instill this hope in this next generation of young adults who are going to move forward and really make a change and make differences in the world around them. So you get to remind me of that, and I appreciate that. And I know your presence here at the board has been appreciated by the board. You all bring your own unique kind of piece and your personality to the table and share what life is like as a student in E.O. Smith. And those lived experiences are really hard to measure. So that contribution, sometimes I think we can forget to thank you for that, to really honor the fact that the lived experiences of our students are sometimes hard to come by. And so you provided that for us over the course of the last couple of years. And it's been really important. It has influenced change. Our conversations at our meetings that we have, I brag on you often because the depth of your thought and your caring, not just about yourselves, but about your colleague, your peers, about what happens in the school, what happens with your teachers, what happens with just what's happening in the world. You know, we've been through a couple difficult, conversations around some serious things that are happening and that you bring to the table. And again, it just reinstitutes I think, a certain degree of hope that we are in such good hands with you all as leaders. I just want a little something for you. Valerie already was a spoiler alert, so she knows. Thank you for everything that you've done. And best wishes to all of you in your new adventures that you have done. And come back and thank you guys.
Before we get into special reports or superintendent reports, I want to jump to the consent agenda. Anybody have any changes they want to make to the consent agenda? Take anything off, revise, etc.? No?
Jim, can you take the minutes off? I have to abstain on that one.
Sure. Yeah, we'll take the minutes off of the consent agenda. Any other changes? All right, then I would certainly entertain a motion to approve with that, the minutes being removed. So moved by James. Second by Tony. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passes. Tim, did you want to address the minutes?
Nothing to discuss other than they just need to be voted separately so I can abstain.
Okay. All right, then, do you want to make a motion to approve the minutes? You can make that motion.
Even though I have to abstain.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Don't let it go. But anyway, so motion by Deborah, second by Janice. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, I can put it to a vote. On favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions, Tim? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. Now we can go back. Dan, you have a report for us tonight?
I do. Thanks for coming. Listen about athletics, everyone. I will try my best at brevity. So before I get started, what's that? Do you have a PowerPoint? No, just a couple of facts. I will be quick. First thing I just want to mention that's not on the handout I'm gonna refer to in a minute is the spring season can be a challenge with the senior outing and prom, and that's also tournament time and the weather comes into play, and we have had a particularly rainy spring, and we have a lot of conflicts that come up, but I do want to just give a shout out to Mr. Agnello and particularly two of his students who missed the senior field day for all students. They were out there the entire day from the first thing in the morning until well after school, prepping that softball field so that our girls can play a home tournament game. So just, we just say a little shout out to Matt and, just so you know, this is how the day goes. Matt will text me. I don't know if we get the field ready. Matt, we have to play the game. I don't know, it's dicey. When do you make a call? I need to know by 11. He'll text me at 11. I'm not sure. We've been working really hard. We've, put down 2 pallets of Speedy Dry. Matt, we have to play. We'll make it happen. And that's how it goes. He's probably cursing me under his breath, but they make it happen. And it's our students. We don't have, it's not in the Enfield Public Works. It's so phenomenal that our students have ownership and that they're doing this, and oftentimes we don't get to thank them enough, or sometimes they blend in the back. So I just want to mention that. All right, the next thing I want to mention is, I think the teachers in the room would agree with me. I am going to really miss our senior class. There's something really special about, at least I work with the athletes. They are a phenomenal group. In 8 years, this is by far the most charismatic, high-performing, both academically and athletically. We are sending off a very well-prepared, very responsible, very mature, and very athletic senior class. So I just want to wish them good luck. And, that's everyone in the room supporting these guys. So, let's get to some stats. You have a handout here in your packet. And just a couple of things. We have, I'm not going to go through all of them, but we have a little over 1,000 kids at E.O. Smith. 551 of them participate in a sport at some point during the school year. That is a phenomenal number. Most schools are looking at about 25 to 35% range of their student population. We've got a very high population involved in the athletic department, which is great. We know that there is a direct correlation between participating in a sport or a club or athletic specifically and academic performance. 432 of our 551 athletes, that's 78%, were on the honor roll at some point during the school year, at least once. That is an astonishing number that these kids are, and I have 2 kids at EO that do 3 seasons of sports. They take these guys, Mary and company, they're taking super high level classes. They're getting a lot of homework. They're participating in the band or in the performing arts. They're going to practice. A lot of times they're going to another club or team practice at night. They're getting home and then they're sitting in front of their computer for another 3 to 3.5 hours doing homework till midnight. At least that's what my house looks like. And it is really, it's amazing to see what these kids are accomplishing. There were so many kids that attained all academic status this year. I could fit it on 2 pages. It's the vast majority of our athletes. I mean, there were only 1,688 instances of honor roll in the school, and the vast majority of them were kids who were doing sports. All right, so I want to say thank you to the Board of Ed, where our athletic department is fully funded. Our athletes do not have to do pay to play like our surrounding towns, Graham, Holland, Coventry. It makes a difference in terms of performance and their social well-being. So on behalf of our student body, I just want to say thank you to everyone in the room. 24 out of our 26 varsity teams qualified and competed in the CIAC state tournaments this year. Okay, very successful, performed at a high level. I believe, Mary can correct me if I'm wrong, today was the second time in program history that girls lacrosse have qualified for the tournament. So congratulations. Boys cross country, girls cross country, boys ice hockey, boys lacrosse, softball, crew, all were at the very top of the conference for their performance, whether they were champions or runner-up or co-champions. And so we had what I'm trying to say is we had a great year in the athletic department. I have included here, I'm not going to read all the names, I could not, like I said, I could not include all of the kids that need all academic status. It's almost all of our athletes. But you have here a list of our top performing athletes who attained all conference or all state status. So, yeah, that here. Does anyone have any questions about academics, performance, trying to be? Okay. The other thing, I know there have been a lot of questions about, so I'll pivot over to, is we are piloting a summer program this year. And so there was a lot of planning and thought put into what would that look like? How could we implement it? How could we work with buildings and grounds, our athletic training services, and sort of manage everything? So, what it's going to look like this summer is we're providing an opportunity in the overwhelming majority of our sports programs, not all of them. Some of them we can't get contracts with Coventry Lake, for example, or with the community center for swimming. But the vast majority of our sports are going to be providing some sort of experience, 2 hours twice a week. So a total of 4 hours per program. The way it's going to look here is it's going to be every evening, Monday through Thursday, from June 23rd to August 7th. There will be an admin on site, and there will also be an athletic trainer on site from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. In the evening. And we did our best to try to so that kids didn't have to choose one sport or another. It was tricky trying to plan out so that there weren't conflicts for kids. So every day, 4 p.m., we've got an open weight room session with trained staff for kids that want to work out, maybe not do a sport, but they want to lift weights or do conditioning. And then from 5 to 7, on Mondays and Wednesdays, one sport will have the 2 gyms, one sport will have the turf. From 7 to 9, it'll flip-flop, and that'll be Mondays, Wednesdays, Tuesdays, Thursdays throughout the whole summer. We're going to collect a lot of data, who's coming, what sports are getting the highest proportion of athletes, what kinds of, getting back to the question about equity, who's accessing this, who has transportation, litany of other questions we're going to have. I think that's it.
Thanks, guys.
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, that's athletics.
No, I was superintendent report.
All right. So we all know how I am with economy of learning. Hardly. Although I know Jim will be giving me the step down, so I'll try that.
It's like all of it.
So usually at this meeting, this is where we kind of run down what we've done this year. It can't be all inclusive. We would be here for days of the work that's happened in the building, the work at this board, et cetera. So I did also include just copies of the superintendent's reports in September that try to keep you up to speed with what's happening in the moment. And a lot of the things that I'll reference are also some of the presentations that were provided by our department heads and directors throughout the year. So I'm not going to represent all that stuff, but I'll just, kind of acknowledge some of the data that was provided throughout the year through those presentations. So again, we use this at the beginning of just about every presentation, is just going back and taking a look at and reminding ourselves and each other what our major overarching goal is. So it is equity. And the goal is to achieve equity maximizing our participation, our performance, and the experiences of our students. So when we look at the data, That's largely the data that we're looking at is, how are our students doing? How are they performing academically? And again, as you mentioned earlier, we're talking every student. I don't even like saying all students because that's kind of nebulous. Every student means every individual student will be held to high standards of expectation, and we're figuring out ways to get them there, whether it's participation in providing a sense of belonging, like clubs and sports, whether it's through helping them figure out how they learn and how they can improve their experience in learning and their performance in learning. And then the experience piece that I mentioned earlier, which is really, really hard to measure. And we've been working hard on finding ways to get some feedback from students about what their lived experience is within the hallways, within the classrooms, within the athletic fields, to really kind of have an idea of what their experiences are like so that we can do better. So last time we had talked about NEAS last year. We did submit our first report of progress and planning for NEAS, and the outcomes were very good. We knew last time that after our decennial visit that we had met all of the standards. In our letter, it's going to say that there's 8 standards. We aren't necessarily held accountable to all 8 because we have combined their commissions so that the tech schools are now part of the public school commission. But we have, I think our teachers worked really hard. Our directors certainly worked very hard, and our curriculum instruction and assessment coaches worked hard over the past 5 years to create the situation where we have a curriculum in a common format and common template. And now most of those are completed to stage 1 and 2 of understanding by design template. So some of the things that I shared in our first year report were what we would consider to be the exemplary practices, and some of the things that NEAS brought up when they were visiting us and just kind of reporting out on where we stand. So the first is teacher-led professional development, and I completely agree with a lot that was said about the collective expertise of our teaching staff. I think our most effective and well-received professional development opportunities have been because teachers have come forward to present to their peers and to share their best practices. I think what's really kind of cool about it is the teachers don't claim to be experts. In a lot of ways, they're trying new things and implementing and just kind of sharing how it's going and what they're learning along the way. What are some of the pitfalls as you go along? So that collective expertise goes a long way in moving us forward. So past several years, we focused on professional learning, on collaboration, curriculum development, alignment of learning targets, informative assessments, really agreeing on what students need to know and how they need to show that they know it. And that's the science piece. Instructional strategies led by colleagues around topics of student-centered learning, equity, social emotional learning, belonging, and getting into, how can we share experiences on how to grade. So those types of professional development opportunities are there as well. So I also had to report out on what the obstacles are. And so this particular case, obstacles include overcoming the building of the standards-based curriculum in all disciplines. It's a heavy lift in a short amount of time to go back and reference the fact that we're held accountable to the frameworks and to the Common Core standards and make sure that it's the backbone of our curriculum. It's certainly a heavy lift. The shift in the culture from a student-centered to a student-centered approach to learning, as well as a culture where adults are feeling comfortable sharing their practices with each other. And that goes back to the whole teacher-led PD that, teachers I feel are really stepping up to the plate to share what their experiences are with each other. And it's been well received. We also discussed the Smart Recovery Program. We've talked about that over the past few years. That was something that Lou, in collaboration with our youth services director, had brought in. So the therapy group for students who might have some addiction, whether it's addiction to their cell phone, whether it's to nicotine, THC, whatever the case may be, is something that we lifted up and that the NEASC reported back on as being a positive program. Collaboration between Equity, Diversity, and Justice Subcommittee, of the board, Parents for Racial Equity Group, and the teacher group, the Racial Justice Academy group. You know, coming together to share the collaborative and share a common goal for supporting the education of all staff on how to deal with the things that are happening in the classroom. It's not intuitive, especially when you're in an all-white school, to not all white, but largely white, I should say, for us to learn and know how to deal with those situations and anticipate them. So the Racial Justice Academy has done an absolutely amazing job in bringing that forward to teachers. They're growing their cohort, but at the same time, they're also offering professional development to really help improve the experience for the adults, but also especially for the students that are in their classrooms. And this kind of just takes us through the progression of what that looked like when it first started way back in 2020 to where we are now, where there have been a couple of meetings with all of those folks coming together to really talk about what's going well and what areas do we need to fully support moving forward. The grading pilot that provides consistent guidance, oversight, and accountability for consistent application of grading practices across classrooms and disciplines. So sharing with NEASC, their feedback was that there's a lot of really great things happening at EO Smith. I don't think any of us would argue about that. But one of the things that they shared was that there is a lack of consistency, coherency, and clarity in a variety of areas. And so whether it's clarity from administration to teachers, from teachers to students, from administration to parents or students, across the board, looking for ways that we can become more clear, coherent, and consistent in our messaging and in our practices was something that was a recommendation from NEASC when they came to visit both their collaborative conference and the decennial. So that's something that we've taken on. And it kind of has a flow and a through line to the work and the decisions that are made. And the coordination of tier 2 interventions. Writing on this is really small. There's a lot to it. We're going to look at some data. Melissa Tubbs shared some of her slides from her presentation that she shared with the staff last week. Share the outcomes of what those tier 2 interventions look like. This is a big, again, a heavy lift this year. Glad that Matt mentioned, the SASH piece. We'll be sharing that. There's so many components to the Student Center, and it does take a considerable amount of thought and effort and energy on the part of teachers for that program to work. So when you're looking at the data, there's reasons why that participation has increased, and then there's some movement that we have to have for next year for our next steps in really connecting the individual student data to their performance data to their intervention data. And then the REACH program was a program that Lou, along with Omar and Sam in the main office have been working out together to look at our students with chronic absenteeism. And we heard a little bit about that tonight as well. It's really difficult for students to achieve if they are not present. And so that was a huge focus. We'll share a little bit of the outcomes of that as well when we look at the data. So we are seeing some improvements in some students. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. I think so. What's really unique about this process is that it entails taking a look at the root cause instead of, it's not necessarily, it's an attendance issue as a symptom. There's a root cause that's causing that to happen. And unless we're addressing the root cause, then the behavior is just going to continue, maybe with some Band-Aids, maybe with trying to coerce the kid to come to school, but it's bigger than that. And so Lou and Omar have really been working with families, doing home visits when it's necessary, but really establishing action plans that are based on a root cause. and not let's throw things at the wall and see what sticks. Let's really get down to what's causing the issue and create some interventions for that. So the commendations that they put forward from that report that was submitted, they commended the school district's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion and belonging, specifically the 5-step process for the equity protocol. They commendation on the authentic learning opportunities in ag and in plant science. The implementation of the pilot portfolio, and which is not necessarily a pilot anymore, but it's a big part of the work. And presentation as a means of assessing student attainment of the vision of the graduate skills and dispositions. So NEASC is always looking to see if the vision of the graduate, which is an area of, it's one of our priority areas, and we'll see that, our vision of how the vision of the graduate is measured, communicated, and how we're actually, and to Mrs. Hodgson's point, it really is all of our goals to put out citizens who are responsible and accountable. And so that's the piece of that vision of the graduate that's really, really critical to the work that we do. They talked about the dedication, passion of curriculum instruction and assessment coaches and the curriculum director. Do a lot of work done on the curriculum. So our teams had a lot of interaction with those folks when they came to visit. Spearheading and piloting of the learning target tracker by the science department. The separation of academic and habits of scholarship to most accurately assess student growth and learning. Enhancements to the agri-sciences. So that's visible more on learning target trackers where students have an opportunity to self-assess on how they're doing on their habits of scholarship. Separation, the enhancements to the ag science pathway for students and newly developed courses. Course clusters, positive changes to school safety to take a more therapeutic approach, which was a big decision made by the board 5 years ago. It's just about 5 years coming up where that decision was made to take our security plan, and we'll see that a little bit later in the presentation, take the security plan to include a strong mental health piece, as opposed to it being more punitive in nature. And then the commission was pleased to note that we met all 8 foundational standard foundational elements, 3 of which are actually connected to the ag side, not the ag side, the folk side. So just really quickly, you've all seen this before. This is our school improvement plan. We've shared this in the past. We have a retreat next week with our department heads and directors for the next iteration. And, you know, where have we met some of our targets? Where haven't we met some of our targets? It's a 3 to 5 year plan. So looking at those benchmarks, there's definitely some work that we need to do with that. We've hit some of our benchmarks, and some others we're not quite there yet. But again, it's that process. So the first one is basically our goal on learning culture. So we're making the connection to the NEASC recommendations into our priority areas. So our 3 areas of our SIP are connected to the 3 priority areas that E.O. Smith identified for itself, which is a brand new part of the NEASC process over the past probably 5 or 6 years, as opposed to a checklist of compliance things that we needed to do. So these are aligned to make sure that we can make that connection. Specifically, our goal was achieving equity through participation, performance, and experience, providing equitable access to course offerings for academic achievement. We see that in the fact that there aren't a lot of prerequisites. That's something that's been in place for EO for a long time, long before 5 years ago, to make sure that every student who wants access has access to that higher level of rigor. The challenge then becomes taking them from where they are to where they need to be as far as being able to handle that rigor. Developing student learning and evaluation policy that supports continuous learning and intellectual risk-taking, and then leadership opportunities to students, parents, and community members within the decision-making process. Our second goal is there's a written curriculum consistent. That was a big one. When schools don't meet that foundational element, it's pretty common. So it was really a big deal when we did meet that foundational element, because being on as many visits as I've gone on, that's always the one Because sometimes it's really difficult to get curriculum written across all disciplines, even if it's just that foundational piece where it has to be in a common format, a common template, stored in one location so that it's easily accessed. So the work that's being done. So, you know, we did a curriculum curriculum audit and inventory. We've been working off of that for several years. We're in a really good place right now, which is a good thing because, you know, the ESSER funds have gone away. And so the money that we have to actually pay for curriculum writing is depleted pretty well. And then the last one is the intervention piece to support learners. And we've talked a lot about the intervention plan, and we'll talk more about it in a second. So using some student surveys to determine when the student learning is met, examining student performance data to determine the effectiveness. And we looked a little bit at that back in December at our first retreat, where we took a look at some of the data to say, okay, how do we do with the snapshot? How did that snapshot compare to last year's data? I'll have some data. I have some data for you today around snapshot one, semester one, and then the second snapshot. And then probably if we have a meeting in August, July or August, we'll have the data then for the end of the year, or in September at our first meeting, just so that we can make that comparison to where we started, where we ended, and then how does that compare to where we were last year. So reporting out also from the idea of our equity action plans. So almost exactly a year ago, or 5 years ago, E.O. Smith received a petition from Black Lives Matter, E.O. Smith. And from there, the equity action plans were kind of developed and grown. And there were 5 major parts to it. I always sound really confident when I start talking about them, and then I always forget one. So, you know, one was curriculum, was infusing equity into our curriculum. The other was providing professional development for our teachers and staff around implicit bias and all of those pieces. Community outreach, which we heard about today, our families coming together with our teacher groups, with administration and with the board to really work together. The security plan was another piece. And we'll talk a little bit about that again as well. And then lastly, it is the diversification of staff. I remembered all of that. So looking at all of the major pieces under the equity lens, so equity through curriculum development, which was one of the major goals. News graduation standards and performance indicators that were developed using the Common Core state frameworks always need to be in a process of revision. They are not the end all be all. They never are. They evolve sometimes with new curriculum that's put out by the state. Sometimes by just what we know. We need students to know and be able to do. We have that flexibility as part of the curriculum being a living kind of breathing document that should be changing as we learn more about our kids. Curriculum developed with an identity lens. So what that was in the departmental development of the curriculum. When they're looking at devising their curriculum and really looking at how can we make the curriculum relevant to students and invite their identity into that piece. Summer curriculum writing requests are being reviewed right now, and other courses will be prioritized for 25-26. So we're in pretty good shape with what we have in place right now. And then stage 3 UBD is being addressed by some departments. That's where they are. And all departments are in different places. Different curricular documents are in different places. So that third piece is really just adding resources. Generally it's framed out to include learning targets and or uploading your unit guide or your learning target trackers. Really small. So this is just a list of the professional development opportunities that have been provided this year. And again, provided many of them through the work of our staff. You can peruse them. I've given those to you generally as part of my superintendent's reports. I'll give you the agenda and you can look at the sessions, the session, descriptions and things like that. This is over the course of this year, and you're going to notice that within that is, things like fitness fun and crafting connections and, laugh more, stress less, which were staff developed, sessions on belonging and on wellness, on teacher wellness. So what's built in over the past few years into professional development is a little bit of time in the day for teachers to attend to their wellness. That was something that definitely wasn't a part of our life pre-COVID, but is a really critical part now to planning those professional development days. Community outreach. You can see there's a list of things that have happened. And again, it's not all inclusive, but some major pieces. The Parents for Racial Equity group meetings, Government Academy with Mansfield. Janice and I did our second year with the Government Academy in the town of Mansfield, which we really need to get to talk to community members about what happens at EO. And they had some really, really good questions. Just even helping them to understand how a regional school district works is great. It's great practice for me to continue to explain it. And just some other pieces of opportunities where folks from the community were invited into the school. So Suzanne is here with, Empty Bowls and Teach-In was a huge community event that has kind of, from my perspective, being a full timer here, has become really a backbone to the experiences at EO. Student-centered learning, again, a lot of that is information that's also shared in the PD of how are we focusing on professional learning for instructional strategies on student-centered learning. So again, teachers teaching teachers, sometimes bringing in folks. We worked with Tim Klein from BC. On belonging. So we have a cohort of teachers, a pretty large cohort of teachers who have been working with him and with each other on belonging and bringing, even if that work is for the teacher's piece. But eventually, hopefully the plan is that makes its way to some of the practices and that's right. To enhance students' experiences with belonging. Policy committee work, lots of it. On student grading and reporting specifically over the past 2 years. A lot of focus groups, a lot of our policy committee going to department meetings and to our faculty meetings and then breaking up into department meetings, as well as meeting with kids and having focus groups with parents over the past couple of years to really engage in the conversation around what the concerns and needs are. Social emotional wellness for students. Again, a lot of this is redundant, so I'm going to kind of dip through. The measuring students' experiences, St. Joe's came back and met with our students of color specifically to really, and they come back now because they want to. We don't pay St. Joseph's University to come. They want to come back. They want to meet with our kids. They want to hear what's going on. They're truly invested in helping us to make EO a better place. And they do a really nice job of being honest with us about what we need to do in order to facilitate that. The harassment flyers, that was an idea that came up a couple of years ago. That's alive and well. Apparently that was you. And the dignity-based teaching was a huge success because of the contributions, number one, of, again, Suzanne, not to put you on the spot, but the organization and the effort and time that went into organizing all of that and all of the folks who contributed to those presentations, it was outstanding. Equity, safety, and security. And again, I'm not reading through all of these because this is the same exact presentation that I gave back in April, when we were doing a review of our security. We are just in the process of hiring. We had a retirement for one of our security folks. So we just hired and are signing a new person to come on, very exciting. He's very excited to come and to be a part of EO Smith. I've been in and out of kind of being a part of this community peripherally for a long time. Protocol for students leaving the classroom during class. These are some things that I mentioned a little bit later on in the presentation, but these things, the baby detectors, having the dedicated security person monitoring the front entrance, things like that, from the personnel perspective. Building structural security, we've been talking at the building committee a lot around what is happening and what's going to be happening at the front entrance. So, the doors are on order, the double buzz-in piece is, and the new security booth, all of those things are in the works. I'm glad Dennis isn't here right now because he's a little frustrated with the supply chain right now. So he's very eager to get it started so that he has it done when we come in the fall. And then we have the mental health support staffing. So again, I reported back in April, we've always had 2 social workers over the past 5 years. We now have 4, with one of those being a homeschool family liaison who's Omar and works with Lou. We've hired another full-time psychologist that was new last year. It took us a long time, had been in the budget for a while, and finding someone who was going to be able to fill that role was a challenge, and we were very lucky to get the professional that we have. And then the REACH program that I mentioned earlier. And this is just kind of where other things, it just didn't fit into any of the other categories, but there's a lot of work that's going on between committees here. This is a reflection very much of the committee work that happens at the board level for the turf, leading the turf bill, or conversations about the Star and Depot building. It seems like that's like the project that I can't even say never end. It's the project that we just need to figure out how it's going to get started, but there's a lot of homework that has to happen prior to jumping in and making such a huge investment. So just a lot of, we're negotiating an administrator contract this year. We're in the process of negotiating with our custodians for this year. We had a lot of conversations with Union and Eastford this year. Union voted for us to be a designated school. Eastford's in the process of, making that decision for themselves for next year. So I anticipate that commitment to, being there to meet with their board and things like that will be very similar to how it was in the beginning of the year this year. And then a lot of collaboration with the food service director. And we've talked about this at the board level around the whole food insecurity piece and the fact that we're not alone in having increased student lunch debt. I'm proud of the way that our food services folks embrace it. There's some changes that had to happen, which is tightening things up a little bit. But at the same time, no kid goes hungry at EO Smith or in any of it. The food services director is very adamant about supporting that philosophy. And then indoor air quality, again, the project that never ends. It's been ongoing for a long time. So, quick review of data, and it's going to be a little more meaningful when we have the final grades for the year. But what I wanted to share with you are some trends. When you look at, we were looking at Ds and Fs. We went through all of that process at our last retreat. But we only had last year's data, and then we had snapshot data. We were comparing those two. So what we have now, the first column is the snapshot 1. Second column was the semester, and the third column is snapshot 2. So we look at that and we're like, Fs are high, snapshot 1, Fs go down, semester 1, Fs are back up, semester 2. And this isn't overall data. This is this is social studies data, but you're going to see the same trend. It's almost like, if I were to hypothesize about what's going to happen for the semester 2 data, it's going to follow that similar pattern where the Fs might be a little bit higher at snapshot kids start to kind of figure it out, that they need to get their act together. And then, we see some of those pieces start to, remedy before we get to the actual final grade. So when we look at the Fs for semester one, so we see that they went down pretty significantly. D's went up a little bit, you kind of expect that. C's went up a little bit, B's went up a little bit, and the A's came down a little bit. It's gonna be a really common trend for most of the departments that you're gonna see. So it's almost as though some of the F's became D's, some of the D's became C's, some of the C's became B's, and some of the A's also became B's. You know, in that mix, but definitely, you know, a much more kind of straight through line, with the F's being lower, for the semester grade. Well, language, you see, again, another similar trend. Similar, interesting with ag that those kind of stay the same, even though the F's went down, A's sort of stayed the same. Our C's went up considerably, our B's went up considerably, and just a slight shift in the B's. In the A's. PE health, they're an anomaly. Can't see the line for the F's, that line is rather small. Fine arts, also similar. English, similar trend. Math, similar trend. CTE was interesting. Because their C's actually went down a little bit. Their F's went down, their B's went up, their C's went down a little bit, their B's went up, and their A's came down slightly. So just a little anomaly on that one. Science, similar trend. I think the bottom line is, you know, when we see the snapshot data, and then it's almost like a little bit of, I don't want to say it's misleading, but it's its own creature to compare the snapshot to the actual semester grade. Almost doesn't make a ton of sense because we know that semester grade is going to be better as the kids kind of get that warning shot through the snapshot that, you know, that they might be in trouble. So looking forward to next year, comparing last year's data to this year's data, and then looking at the intervention piece. So that's the next piece. Thank you to Lou and to Melissa for kind of compiling this data, really in a nice way. The information that it shares is something that I think we really need to think about and consider. So when you look at our attendance data, our Hispanic and Latino students make up 12.76% of the population, but they represent 20% of the students who have an attendance issue. Ashford students, similar. They're 14.01% of our total population, yet they represent 26.36% of our attendance issue. Special ed, same, 18.81% of the total pop, and 36.64% of the students who are struggling with attendance. And then same, free reduced lunch is 22.17% of our population. And it represents 48.18% of the students with attendance issues. And there's overlap between those groups. So, you know, a Latino student from Ashford, you know, with overlap there. Student center use. This is broken down by the reasons why folks were coming into student center. So student center is the room over there where Melissa kind of coordinates, you know, the SAP and the peer tutoring, but the student center piece are kids who generally get scheduled in the majority of them, you can see 39% get hard scheduled in, usually through what we would call an SRBI, a scientifically research based intervention kind of meeting, whether it's CAT or SAT or there's all kinds of, those meetings that are happening, looking at kids who are struggling and then hard scheduling to the student center for support. Sometimes it's social emotional, sometimes it's academic, sometimes it's both. 14% come for reassessment or didn't come for reassessment, 18% were drop-ins, and 29%, which I think is really encouraging, is for peer tutoring. So the over 100 peer tutors that were trained this year, was looking to continue that, to train more students for next year. Peer tutoring by department. Math is certainly taking advantage, and or students who are taking advantage of the peer tutors in math. Love the fact that peer tutors are any grade, grades 9 through 12. You guys talked to us about peer tutors at one point. Yeah, a while back. We have a couple of students who are on our student advisory who are peer tutors, and talk about how they get back as much as they give through that process. World language is next. 26%, science is 18%, English is 7%, social studies is 7%, and then there are tutors for other courses, for some specials, such as art and things like that. Academic study halls, or the SAC program, is for usage. You can see that math has had 44.4% of the referrals. Social studies is at 3% of the referrals, science 33.3%, and English 18.2%. And I don't remember the exact percentage that Steph shared during her English presentation, but it was 18.2% is a huge increase to the uses of SASH last year. Generic academies. So I'm sorry.
Quick question. So the academic study halls, are those the ones that are staffed by? Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah. So that's that's.
I was just trying to cross-reference to some things that were said during.
Oh yeah. SASH was, Matt had mentioned kind of the SASH piece of, that did start a few years ago, I think, with the science department. And that's kind of where things started to change, so that teachers are now scheduled into academic study halls instead of a different duty when possible. And then the academies they happen 3 times a year. They happen during the Christmas break, April break, and then the 3 days after the end of school. It's 2 days at the end of school this year, because of the way that the schedule falls. But looking at recommendations to academy, kind of take a look. Math and science have the majority of the referrals. Social studies is there. World language is 9%. CTE, it's nice that we are able to cover all of the disciplines, including the specials, so not just the core areas. And that's, again, a kudos to our staff, because they are willing to sign up to come and work for academies, which is great. My students have one-on-one opportunity with a teacher who has a specialty in that subject area.
Sharon, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
If 100, for example, 158 recommended and 52 attended, do you know reasons why those other 100 plus students aren't attending, or what happens to their outcomes?
So it's a good question. I think we've talked about that. Hoping that the idea of, a hard end, that, this year, the end of the unit, 5 days past the end of the unit was the deadline. Kids will be recommended, and either the students or the families will opt out and choose not to come. We've talked kind of about what the natural consequences for that can and maybe should be, especially with the policy written the way it is right now. And even the way the policy pilot was written last year, that, you know, you don't come to April, you're way past that 5-day, past the end of the unit by the time it comes to June. So the challenge is, you know, and I think it's a challenge for teachers too, is, you know, they want what's right and best for kids. And when you have a kid who's saying, hey, can I make this up now? That's happening. It probably always has happened, but then it's that kind of that hard and fast deadline thing. So how true are we to the hard and fast deadline versus are we, you know, what decisions are we making that's in the best interest of this kid to demonstrate? And that's, I don't have a solid answer for that because I'm not going to be in the head of the teacher saying you absolutely can't give this kid an opportunity. But
I'm just wondering if it's access, you know, like buses aren't running and.
Oh, no, they're declining.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, they're declining to attend.
okay.
Like, I mean, it could be because they're on vacation, or it could be that, or they sign up and they don't attend. That's another piece that happens. So one of the pieces that go along with this, and I mentioned this early on in the presentation, the steps for next year with these particular programs is to match the students who are attending intervention to our DNF list. So that's a big goal for the student center data for next year is, so when we look at our students' performance, getting better, say from snapshot 1 to semester 1, how many of those kids access any of those interventions? And so are they making a difference for their performance? And then the deeper questions that we heard today, and it's an internal motivation versus external motivation is the forever challenge in education. You know, we would love for every student to be internally motivated to come to school and to want to do well for the sake of learning. And not every kid is there. We also know some kids aren't motivated by a grade. So we're looking at, you know, all of the kids that are in front of us who are coming from different experiences with completely different motivators. And then when we talk about grading and equity, part of the challenge with grading and equity, or grading and equity, is that for some kids, it's going to be motivating when they see that 0 in the book to get their act together. For other kids who've been stuck maybe in a cycle of failure for their entire existence, aren't motivated by that 0. They're not motivated by the potential of not having a 0. But they do come here every day, for the most part, minus our chronically absent kids. They show up. And, you know, one of the things that I've said forever is no kid comes to school every day to collect their F. And so that is our mission. How do we make sure that our students are getting what they need, that we're figuring out what's motivating them and what isn't? And in some cases, and Nick, you were big, you were someone who was really honest when you were a student, and now as a board member, and bringing that perspective forward, where, you know, that threshold, those deadlines, or that fear of, or, you know, that punitive side, the grade itself is motivating. So if that's not the case, how are we responding in a way that's moving that student, that hopefully the outcome is they're figuring out how to learn, they're figuring out what motivates them, they're being exposed to different ways to be taught and to be heard, I guess, in some ways, right? And then what are we doing with that moving forward? So that's our big goal for moving forward for next year, is really connecting the data to the performance and the intervention so that we can clearly say that they are what we're investing for time and money is paying off in student achievement and ultimately, you know, hopefully student motivation to get the message that we believe in you and you can do it and we're going to help you get there. That in and of itself, students will run through a brick wall for you if they know you believe in them. And I think we all know that. So any other questions?
Yeah, for the recommendations for academy, what goes into that? Is that a student is failing the class and that's why they're recommended for academy?
Yeah, the teacher recommends.
Because 195 is a big number. It's almost 20% of our population. Why is it that that number is so high? But then when we look at the graphs from earlier on, like not even like 10% of students are failing. Like where's the discrepancy there?
So when they go to the academies, or they go to SASH, or they go to peer tutoring, or to the student center, they have an opportunity to make up those assignments, or to complete them, or to redo them, to reassess on them, and that gets reflected in that grade. So it's a really good question. So even though we don't have the hard and fast of connecting the student to the actual performance, there's breadcrumbs. So that kind of leaves a clue that the interventions must be working if we're moving them from, in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I mean,
I just like it to that not be so squishy.
it's also concerning though that only, 54 out of 195 are actually going. So I don't know how much that can be fully drawn to his academy.
Not just academy. When we're looking at the entire intervention program.
Right.
So just because a kid isn't accessing academy doesn't mean they're not accessing SASH, or they're not accessing peer tutoring. So it's kind of this multi-pronged approach to what fits the kid. For me, the part that's disheartening is when you see those 196 kids who were whatever the number was, being referred, who didn't take advantage of it. So why is there a gap in the value of it? And, it might be, and we've talked about this too much flexibility, and we heard that from Ms. Hodgson, is there too much flexibility, which is why I think, again, the grading and reporting policy kind of creates those boundaries for students to be able to, and without it being super high stakes. We've talked about at the policy level as well. If you're giving homework, and if homework doesn't, if you've missed your opportunity, the learning that you would have gotten from that homework has long passed. Making up that homework doesn't make sense. And so there's a natural consequence that goes along with not being responsible when that happens. So those are the things that conversations around regulations and what that can and should look like for the full implementation is really important. Yes.
Questions on the report? Okay. We do have a couple of motions, on the agenda for tonight, dealing with the policies for non-resident working students. And then you have some concerns. Does somebody want to make a motion? Well, could we get a little background on how you guys came up with this?
So we do that.
Sure.
Yeah, because it's not a policy that we wrote. It's a combination of policies, so.
Yeah, so
We talked about it kind of years ago. We mentioned the idea for retention and recruitment. And then there's other things going on around COVID.
Right.
And it kind of, so now it's come back as a discussion point.
Yeah.
We talked about it earlier in the year, even in this year. We talked as, like during our regular meeting, we talked about, the idea of having a policy that allows teachers to send their students at a reduced tuition.
Right.
And then we talked about that retention piece. So I had gotten some samples from other towns of their policies for that and sent them off to the lawyer. And the lawyer sent back some really guided information about the pros and the cons and, some of the concerns with, there's no litigation stuff that's happening right now. There's things for us to keep in the back of our head around some concerns with, specifically as it relates to special education students and kind of the costs that go along with that. And so the policy committee received all of that information. In that process, in the conversation with a lawyer, I'm like, well, we take tuition kids who aren't staff members' kids, who those same concerns would would be impacted. So, but we didn't have a policy on it, and we didn't have any, so like in order for this policy, if it were approved by the board, in order for the policy to actually be implemented, we then have to sit down with our union reps for the unions, for the folks who have unions, to have them look at and sign an MOU. That MOU would have to be signed every year, agreeing to continuing with the practice. So we're in the very first steps of that. The other piece, with its, Lou and I just met with a family last week who's planning on sending their child here and paying full tuition for that child to attend. It would be really nice to be able to share a policy so I can tell them how it's going to work. As far as transportation and any special ed costs, if they were identified as needing special services, in those pieces, it'd be nice to have a policy that I can hand to them and say, and also a contract that acknowledges that they know and they're aware. So there's two pieces. It started with, let's see what we can do to get something in place for teachers as kind of a perk, and certified, any staff, actually, it's not just teachers. As a perk and also as a means of recruiting and retaining some staff. And then rolled into, but if we're going to go into this policy, we really need to have a policy for our non-staff as well. And so those specific policies came from the combination of Bethel and Lebanon. Bless you. Bethel and Lebanon. We used their policies as a template and then took the recommendations from the lawyer and made sure that those were addressed within those policies. So, things like how it works if you're receiving special ed services or what happens when you leave and things like that, the things that the lawyers recommended.
Tony, before we get to the point of having a motion, I know you have a couple of concerns. Tony mentioned a couple of things to me before the meeting, and before we get to the point of having a motion made, I'd like to have him, if you don't mind, just express what you would come across and going through.
Yeah, I looked at the council points, and I think and a lot of them were focused on making sure we're not bearing costs we don't want to bear.
Right.
I think I saw several provisions in there, including the special education costs, including when not responsible for education services should they become necessary.
Yeah.
Ability to terminate the program in general.
Mm-hmm.
But the area I want to focus on is let's see, I'm looking at the non-resident staff, once on the second page, the second and third bullets. The second bullet says, if the behavior of any child of non-resident additional staff is not consistent, if the behavior is not consistent with the standards for appropriate student behavior, the Region 19 Board of Education reserves the right to terminate its approval of any such child's enrollment. The next bullet point says, it is clearly understood that the superintendent can terminate the program with respect to an individual student with a minimum of 2 weeks notice for just and appropriate causes. Mm-hmm. So I'm first of all trying to figure out what the distinction is. Are we going, I would argue if I was a student, I'd say you have to go to the board because you can't let the superintendent do it.
Right.
So I think that that should be clarified. And then I got to tell you, just and appropriate causes is a non-statement. I don't know what it means. So I'm troubled by that. I think. I guess, for instance, if it was going to be an expulsion issue, would you expect to bring it to like a regular expulsion hearing?
Yes. Yes.
So what would we be looking at as the types of things that can fall under the superintendent ability without going to the board?
Of course, that's a lawyer giving us as much leeway as possible, right? That's what that is, right?
Well, except I don't think
right.
it's really given us any leeway because I think with those two provisions, you'd argue that
or attempt to.
Consistent, and you got to go to the board. It's the board.
I'm not saying it's right. I can see where it came from.
I have a thought. I would like to see language that suggests that you can be expelled on the same reasons that we expel the rest of the group. I mean, or that, you know, these students have to abide by the same rules, because I think when they're set aside at the discretion of our head, you know, of our superintendent, that is dicey. I think you could get your shoes sewed up, you know, really do. So I'd like to see something that, for the safety, that must abide by the same behavioral standards as established.
Well, I think that second bullet point pretty much does that.
Okay,
It says the behavior,
it's the behavior, right?
you know, if it's with the standards for appropriate student behavior, the Board of Education.
Yeah, but, yeah, that's okay. I mean, I get it.
But I think it's the one after that that I don't
I
understand
think you're setting yourself up with it.
what we're looking. I think we're saying, I don't like that one. Or else
Yeah.
be very clear about what it's intended to cover.
So say if a student isn't attending consistently, would that be something that
Say again,
should go to the board? If a student's not attending school, so they've signed on, they're paying tuition-ish. And again, this is on the side of like the staff piece, which is hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that circumstance happening, but that would be, in my mind, that would be an example, potentially. If you have a student with either policy who's not consistently attending school, that's taking up school resources from other students, then why would we continue to have them here? I don't think it's out of or inappropriate for that to be at the board level by any means.
But is that something that's typical for students right now?
Yeah.
Not for students in member towns. There are kids.
I think that's the concern is that you're not going to subject them to the same standards. Nick?
Yeah, I'd like to see this discussed more at policy. I think there seems to be a lot of different policies coming together, a lot of different types of wording. And if we can go through it a little more specifically, because I know we sort of got it for a first read and then sent it here at the policy committee. We didn't fully go through, I don't think.
I gave it to you, and then we had like whatever gap of time between our meetings
Yeah,
to discuss it.
I think it would be good to go back to policy. I don't feel comfortable voting on this right now.
Yeah.
At the board level. I think there's a lot of things. I think there's other lines too, where there's sort of, contradictions that I think we need to go through.
Well,
So,
that would be good because policy really hasn't had very much to do.
no, I know we need some action. We need some action. We need some things to do.
I mean, I think that, I guess just some things that I've been thinking about is if it was an in-district student issue that would go to the board, I think it should go to the board for out of district as well. If it's something else, like the issue that you raised, they're not attending, and that may be more appropriate for the people, the non-staff out of district.
Right.
Although again, the parent's gonna pay the full price and their kids aren't going to school,
I
but
think that their tuition would be,
they'd still be paying the tuition.
if they left early, I think there was something in here where
Yeah, there's
provision where
a,
they would,
it's like prorated.
yeah.
Yeah, it would be prorated. So I mean, I think that if there's a couple of issues like if they're taking resource, something that if it was an in-district student, you couldn't do, but you're not dealing with an in-district student. If there's things like what you said, they're just not attending, but we're having to, have resources for them. I think we should try to be pretty specific about what those are, because I think something like notice for just an appropriate cause is, I have no idea. And I think anybody could argue that nobody knows what that means.
I do think that would be good to pass this policy if that's the intention before the beginning of the next school year. So I don't know when our meeting is. I know we're going to discuss about that, but just so that staff can make appropriate plans, for their students for the next semester.
I have no problem. In fact, based upon the discussion, I will take those motions off for tonight, table them. Because I think it's a good idea, Nick, just to take a little closer look, because Tony has brought up some inconsistencies and you have that vague standard. And Tim, you're absolutely right. That's what lawyers put in there to say, you guys, over time, you can establish what that actually means. We don't really know right now, so we'll throw those words in there and you figure it out as you go, you know, with lawsuits or whatever.
I don't say those words.
Yeah, so I think that the comments I made would be good by both. And I'm assuming that the $10,000 number is something that,
That was, just, so where that came from is they recommended that we not set a lower tuition rate. That'd be a,
that they do it
credit.
as a dollar number.
Yep, and that, so basically every year, the tuition goes up.
Yeah,
And so every year, the board would kind of have to decide what we want that credit to be,
Yeah.
moving forward. So it's an ongoing commitment.
yeah, no, I understand.
to-
I mean, but it
to
would
go
be,
down that
but
road.
but setting that number as 10,000 for the
That
initial,
was, that
which
was
is
getting it into the range where it would be about the same as an ag.
as an ag, okay. And then, the $16,000 number is,
That's our actual tuition number
okay,
for private tuition number
for a private tuition.
for next year.
Excuse me, yes.
That goes up anywhere between 1% and 4% every year.
Now, this would then go to the, you know, if we pass the policy for the MOU with the union, I guess I'm just gonna throw out the same question I asked last time is this, I mean, I think we just have to be aware of the fact that if certain staff members are gonna get this, or they're gonna ask for other things as for other people. I mean, and I guess the question is, if we don't like where it's going, we can just say, we won't do it.
We'll just continue it. Yeah. Well, because the MOU would have to be signed every year, either you could just continue it.
Okay.
All right, so one more thing, you're already busy, committee meetings, you have to reconsider and come back with us with a recommendation if you don't mind, and even if you do.
Do we need to come back as a first read or can we come back as a revised?
Whichever way, since it's gonna go back to you, whatever the
Yeah,
policy.
okay. I mean, bring back to the board.
I mean,
Yeah, bring it
Just a
back to the
revision.
board. Yeah.
I think if you wanted, I mean, if you want to leave it open for now, you could specify, I think the superintendent could do it on items that the committee or the board from time to time so basically it doesn't have to be set right now, but it would leave room for us to say, you could come, we could develop them over time, but it would just not just use just and appropriate.
Or if they, because there's redundancy between the bullets.
Yeah.
Getting rid of the third bullet altogether.
It is another way, then everything would have to go.
And then everything would have to go to the board. And, there's a certain degree of, if there is just an appropriate cause, going to the board shouldn't be, either it's going to go to the board because it's an expulsion.
Right.
And if it's just an appropriate cause, bringing it to the board to validate that it is.
Probably a better way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then in essence, we would be engaged in our judicial function and we would establish what constitutes just an appropriate cause. We would end up defining it, which is what happens in the real world.
And if you were sued, we'd probably be sued anyway, right?
Right. I'm not saying that word.
Well, I mean, basically, you're then going,
Never be by yourself.
But on a higher power side.
Yes, I'm just trying to make you feel good.
I'm less worried, I think, I'm less worried about the positional staff piece. And we're functioning right now without a policy for non-staff. That's my bigger concern.
Yeah.
Is that there's nothing that codifies these agreements that I put it in a letter. When I say your child's been accepted, they write a letter, we have a meeting, we, take a look at, why they're coming here, and then we write them a letter saying, yay or nay.
Do they sign it?
No, they just receive a letter saying this is how
so
it's
this is a
gonna go.
good,
So the policy is very necessary.
Little place accepted by, have them sign it.
On the continent, okay, with your travels, could you maybe join us when we work on this
if I'm around.
Yes. Would you like that, guys?
No, I'm good. Not been, so I don't know when that would be.
Yes, I know, I'm so envious of you.
But you can include me in that.
Yes, so I mean, if you
But
guys.
the goal will be to get this addressed before the next school year.
We have a
Actually,
July.
before that, so it can come to the next board meeting, or whether that's it comes live.
That really segues right into the next discussion item, which is when we're going to meet again.
I thought it was July 1st.
So let's talk about that, because typically we have taken off, either July or August in some circumstances. I don't think we've ever done both, but last year we did have a July meeting.
We did.
We did not have an August meeting, if I remember correctly. But that's what we should discuss right now, is which of the summer months do we feel that we would like to take off, or do we feel that we need to have a meeting for?
But I'll just voice my opinion.
Go ahead. Yep.
I would vote to have the July 1st meeting. I am not going to be in attendance in August. Or you guys really know. Huh? Okay. So if we were going to waive one of the meetings, I would prefer the August, or we could meet both.
I would definitely, I would.
Oh, is that a motion?
So you can,
Okay.
if you make a motion, I'll second it for you.
Is that the consensus? People would rather have the July meeting than the August meeting?
I can't make the July one, but
Uh-oh.
that's fine.
Yeah,
We're not gonna get everyone.
No.
No,
No,
we're
you're
not.
not.
But you'll probably be at policy, so,
I'll be at policy.
yes.
Neutral.
Well, you guys have time though, to be able,
Well, I mean, we'll have to make another meeting, so,
you're gonna be able to have time to have two more meetings of policy in June.
I don't know.
well, we'll have to discuss tomorrow. We'll have to set.
Okay, that's, that flows into whether or not it makes sense to have a meeting in July or is it opposed to August.
No, but I mean, we wouldn't.
Whatever you want to do is fine. Yes, I'm not here in
Okay,
August
see
at
you in
all.
September.
I gotta start. I think, how many people can do July? Can we just find that out?
Right.
I think so. I mean, it depends.
All right. No, you can, July, you can't do July.
That'd be the first.
What about on policy? Do you have time?
I
to
can do policy, yeah.
You can do the policy meetings if they do. too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
You can meet in August. I mean, you know.
Well, if somebody wants to make a motion, the worst that happens is it won't get voted.
Move that we meet in July.
Okay. Is there a second by Janet?
I'll second.
Okay. So that's a motion that's on the table at this stage of the game. Is there any more discussion on this? All right, all in favor of meeting in July?
Aye.
Raise hands.
We'll just
Raise your hand.
hands, yeah. How many do we have? Oh, we have enough of a majority. Okay.
That's gonna be July 1st.
You got that, Joe? Sure, you put your hands up?
Thank you.
Are there any opposed, abstentions? All right, so we'll have a July meeting. And at the moment, nothing's on the board for August. That doesn't mean we can't come in July and decide to meet in August, but for the moment, there's nothing on the table for August. Okay, sound reasonable? Great.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm okay with it unless we need to move these other policies along, and the only time they're ready is in August.
I suspect.
We could have a Zoom meeting.
I'm really hoping we can.
Yeah, we can always have a special meeting for the limited purpose of dealing with one
Yeah.
issue.
All right.
Yeah,
You're right.
Nothing
I
that
think
we're
that's
gonna-
what happened last year, right? Didn't we have a special meeting?
Yeah.
But There's always a workaround. It's always a workaround. So that takes care of that discussion item. Now I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
So moved by Tim, second by Morgan. Is there any discussion on that one?
Do you want to, public want to speak before we go into executive session?
Public,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Executive session.
Thank
Get that done.
No, stick around, do it after we come out of
Oh,
executive
okay.
session.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do it differently, so.
Can we just have 5 minutes?
Well, we haven't voted yet, so we'll open up the door.
Enjoy your last week.
We'll put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Thank you. All right.